beautiful day. We thank you for helping us to be able to come together and study your truths and learn more about you and your message and all the incredible ways that you've opened up for us the way in which to walk. Lord, we could have been on the wrong side of all of these issues and our lives could have been in danger because of it, but you saved us and helped us from that, Lord, just like in the great time of trouble, you'll save us too. This is an incredible time to live in and to look around us and to see everything, all the chaos and everything falling apart. And we know that all the way through this, you're still guiding those who are sincere and willing to seek you out. We thank you for all that you've opened up to us. We thank you for helping us to stay strong this far, and we ask that you help us to continue going forward. We thank you and we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
So, this was going to be Tony's presentation, but she's been struggling at home, so I'm doing it instead. And the video was called The Resurrection of the Papacy. But as I was going through the video, I didn't have much time because I thought I was needing to prepare for next week. So the video I went through and I took the notes, but she kind of gave the backstory to the resurrection of the papacy, and she didn't go into the actual resurrection process from 1989 and forward until a couple videos. Like the next video, the majority of the time she spent also kind of looking into the meaning of the word counterfeit, and then later on, quite a while, she finally gets into where she starts like the if it's in three parts, the third half of the next video and then into the one after that. So I didn't have time to go through those two videos, but we're going to go through this one and see what we learn. I thought it was really interesting. I feel like I watched all these videos and I feel like I finally learned what they meant now. I don't know what happened the first time I watched them, but every time this happens. Okay, so before we get into this, how do we understand? I'm gonna move over here a little bit. I'm gonna ask you guys a couple questions here, just one main question, and you guys tell me what you think. What is the whole relationship between the Protestants and the Catholic Church at Sunday Law? How does that work? Who does which part of the Sunday Law and the work there? What are we thinking? The big Sunday Law. Anyone have any ideas in their mind of how it will work or look like compared to what we used to believe as Adventists?
So the question is, how does what the Sunday law will look like?
Yeah, in terms of the relationship between Protestants and the papacy.
Well, it's not a Sabbath Sunday issue,
Correct. Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the Protestants who are in charge. They make the laws,
Okay.
right? Conservative consumption, probably something in the nature of conservative, austere laws of morality, and perhaps looking at the liberality of the Catholicism, papacy. I'm thinking they're against it until, well, we know that papacy is going to have his power. There's going to be a struggle, right, between the King of the North and papacy and Pope Francis. So in the time of the UN is when papacy will have political power again.
So we'll say it's Sunday Law, papacy goes up in political power.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, and you're saying that these two factions are going to be at odds. So we're going to say Protestants and papacy.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't seem like they're gonna be eye to eye on issues.
Okay. Anyone else? I think that's the general idea that we've all been getting. So from here on, we're going to get into the study. The thing to remember and keep in our minds is at this camp meeting, there was a group of people, or one person or some people, I think it was just some people, who weren't believing that the Catholic Church was going to rise. They were thinking that it was just going to be the Protestants, and the Protestants are the ones who resurrected the power that the papacy used to have at the Sunday Law. I'm not sure why, but some of the things that Tess says in the beginning was to address those issues and those people who were thinking like that. So what we're going to look at is, we know that the papacy was the one who received the deadly wound, right? So it's the papacy's wound that has to heal. And where do we typically put the resurrection of the papacy?
At the Sunday Law.
At the Sunday Law. Okay. So the thing is that we're looking at the papacy like the counterfeit of our movement. And we know that at the Sunday Law, we go to work, right? This is where God's people, the Seventh-day Adventists. So this whole time period from, let's say, 1989 to Sunday Law, God's people are in a work of preparation. And here we go to work. And this is also where the papacy goes to work. So if you go to work here, then you have to have a time of preparation beforehand as well, because you're counterfeiting God's true movement. So her point is that we may say this for simplicity's sake, but this is to say that the papacy resurrects here would be too simplistic. I'm going to put two. It would be like simplistic. It would be like saying 1888 Sunday Law. It's too overly simple. There's more information around it. So she wanted to go into it from that angle and then to show the whole counterfeit line of the papacy. And she starts all the way at the beginning to do that. But the way she explained this, I thought was really interesting because it's really clear. So we came out of captivity in 1989. So we'll say captivity is here. And then here it ends. And here, the work begins. So we came out of captivity in 1989. So there's a place where the papacy comes out of captivity as well. And then a work of preparation happens, and then the work begins externally here at the Sunday Law. And so when does the counterfeit come out of captivity? It can't be Sunday Law, right? Because this is where they go to work. So the coming out of captivity has to be before. And for God's people, we came out of captivity. It's like this mark is where there's like a resurrection time period. She kind of kept intermingling terms, which made it a little bit confusing, but from my understanding, that's kind of where the point was going, was that wherever your preparation time begins, you've come up. Because you can't be making preparations to do a work if you're dead. right? If you're dead, you're in darkness. You know nothing. And that's what happened this side of this waymark. Darkness, no knowledge, death, right? So now you're starting to learn from this side. That would make this the resurrection point, just logically speaking. So what our old Adventist understanding used to be was we all thought that Protestantism enacts the Sunday law, but it's the papacy whose deadly wound was healed. We would have that's going to be enforcing it. So we would have had a little bit of separation between them, but traditionally it would have been the Protestants make the Sunday law, and then the papacy in this time period here would be making the enforcement of it. And it would be kind of like the Protestants would be giving some kind of honor to the papacy, or like bowing to the papacy or something like that. That used to be our old understanding of things. But then what happened is that we started to read some Ellen White quotes. And we're going to see that Ellen White makes a really clear distinction between the two groups. So we're going to go over here. This is Spalding and McGann 1.4. So we'll read this. I saw that the two-horned beast had a dragon's mouth, and that his power was in his head, and that the decree would go out of his mouth. Then I saw the mother of harlots. The mother was not the daughters. So that's important. The mother was not the daughters, but separate and distinct from them. She has had her day, and this time here was what Tess put in here. She is stating that she's referring to the 1260, which was where the strength of her was, of the papacy. And it is past, and her daughters, the Protestant sects, were the next to come on the stage and act out the same mind that the mother had when she persecuted the saints. So this wasn't one of her points, but I thought it was interesting. The mind that she has, that the mother had, was the persecution of the saints, and how she did that. So I saw that as the mother has been declining in power, because the deadly wound was at 1798, and we can see that the papal states, the papacy kept losing more and more power, and then started to lose the papal states and all the territory that it once had in the early and mid 1850s, 1800s. So we'll just put 1798 to 1850 time period that the declining in power has been happening. So the daughters had been growing during the same time, and soon they will exercise the power once exercised by the mother. So the point we want to take from this is that the mother and the daughters are separate and distinct. They're two separate groups. So this is Great Controversy 578.3. We're going to see more on this. The prophecy of Revelation 13 declares that the power represented by the beast with lamb-like horns shall cause the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the papacy. They're symbolized by the beast like unto a leopard. The beast with two horns is also to say to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast. And furthermore, it is to command all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive the mark of the beast. It has been shown that the United States is the power represented by the beast with lamb-like horns, and that this prophecy will be fulfilled when the United States shall enforce Sunday observance, which Rome claims as the special acknowledgement of her supremacy. But in this homage to the papacy, the United States will not be alone. So there's two beasts. We're gonna draw them out here. So we have two beasts, and we're gonna draw our line of distinction here. So we have the mother and we have the daughters. And we know this one. This is referring back to Revelation 13. So we'll call this the leopard beast. These are some funny looking beast, but we'll call this the lamb-like beast. So this beast had its own power, and this one received a deadly wound. So we're going to say it had power, then its power decreased, and then its power is going to increase again. At the same time, when this one starts, this one just keeps going. This one never has like a deadly wound or anything like that. It's just kind of a progressive increase throughout time. Does that make sense? Does that seem equal to what we know? Or do I seem like I'm making things up here?
This seems right.
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay. It's really simple, but it really helps to, I don't know, the more I learn these things and how to make them more simple, it helps understand things like Revelation 17 a lot better. That's still a little complex here and there sometimes. So the influence of Rome in the countries that once acknowledged her dominion is still far from being destroyed. And so those countries, what we're going to look at, it's not just Eastern Europe. You also have South America, and then some parts of Africa. And then the rest of Europe, because they're not that interested these days either. But soon they will be again. So these countries, the effect the papacy had and the sway with these nations isn't over yet. It decreased. It decreased in strength, but it's going to come back in strength. So I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. So that's going to be here. The infliction, we're going to skip this for now. I want to go back in here. And both, in here, that bottom of the paragraph, in both the old and new world, the papacy will receive homage in the honor paid to the Sunday institution that rests solely upon the authority of the Roman Church. So we saw this, and then here, this is great controversy, 441, but the beast with lamb-like horns spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. So again, all these quotes are showing a clear separation between these two beasts. And Ellen White says this is the daughters or Protestants, and this is the mother, the papacy. But they're all saying the same thing, that these two are separate and distinct. It gets iffy because then it goes into the Sunday institution. But then what we learned in our movement was that it's not a literal Sunday Sabbath, which Fel pointed out at the beginning of this. Let me read the pink part here, the pink highlighted area. The infliction of the deadly wound points to the downfall of the papacy in 1798. After this, says the prophet, his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Paul states plainly that the man of sin will continue until the second advent. Thessalonians 2:3-8. The very close of time, he will carry forward the work of deception. I'm going to just circle that for a second. And the Revelator declares, also referring to the papacy, all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him whose names are not written in the book of life. So the Protestants are going to do the part of persecution. Persecution. They're definitely going to do that because they're exercising the mind of the papacy during the 1260. But the papacy, this entity, was the deceiver. Deception. So this is off her topic, but it kind of light bulbs in my mind that this is who the deception is attributed to, okay? And we have something called the Great Test that we've been understanding, where it makes it clear where the easy line between good and evil is, right? So we have the whole nationalism issue. That's not how you spell that. So we have racism, sexism, homophobia. So when you understand this issue, you can look out and you can see a video of how police treat, the Black population, and you can see how racism works. You can see sexism and how people try to take rights away from women and treat them like they're a little lesser than men. You can see all the vile, horrible ways they treat, the LGBTQ plus community. And it's clear to see. It's a very clear line drawn in the sand between good and evil. This is easy. But so the Protestants, the conservative Protestants will be over here on this side. And so that's easy to see. The problem is the papacy is the deceiver. It's the big work of deception made, and he's not letting go of them that easily because it was too easy to use that method. So deception goes right into counterfeit. Because when you're trying to counterfeit something, right, you're trying to deceive someone into believing that the wrong thing is the right thing, correct? So this is deception, deceiving. It leads right back into counterfeit. So that is the papacy's work. And the thing that we then saw was, when it comes to the whole Sunday law issue, is we saw early writings and we saw great controversy. And so we saw this in the 1850 time period, and this was in the 1888 time period. And we understand that from these books, what was the sin? Let me ask you guys. What was the sin that filled the cup of the United States in the 1850s time period?
Slavery.
Slavery. And 1888 was a literal Sunday law. I'm just going to put the enforcement of Sunday sacredness. So we saw that there had already been 2 histories where this was going on. So we realized that in our time, if we're going to use triple application, we have Sunday law in our time period and whatever that's going to be. So, Sunday law at the end of the world. So,
I have a question.
yeah.
So the sin of 1888, was it a literal Sunday law, or was it I don't know how to explain it, but did it have more to do with the inalienable, taking away
The conscience.
the concept, the inalienable right, because what we're learning now is that, yes, the Protestants wanted a literal Sunday law, but they had an exclusionary for the Sabbath keepers, saying, we'll give you we'll give you a card saying that you can worship on Sabbath and work on Sunday just for you, because that's like an exclusionary clause. So, but the unalienable right says that you can't do that, because you can't give or take away, because that right is inherent within you.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I don't know if I spelled that right, but that's going to be across the board. And the reason why that wasn't going to work out, though, is because if time went on and more natural disasters would have happened, they would have said, well, it's because of these people who we allowed to still keep Sabbath that we're getting judged, so let's take that away. So who's to say if that time period went on to be finished, then that it would have stayed that way to where they keep the Sabbath. But it for sure, inalienable rights is the whole point, because it's going against the right of human ability to follow their conscience, which is the inalienable right. I swear, did I spell that wrong? Hold on. Inalienable or unalienable? It's probably inalienable.
It's both.
Unalienable?
It's unalienable. One is Old English and one is New English. So, yeah, one is inalienable. Yeah.
Which one did I use, old or new?
I think it's old. I think the new is inalienable. But they're both correct.
Un makes more sense because un means not alienable. You can't alienate me from that right because I'm born with that right. So we're born with rights that no one has the right to take away or give, because they don't own them. It's just something that you're born with. You know what I mean?
Right.
Alienable meant to the ability to, I don't know if I can paraphrase it right, to transfer ownership. Alienable, being able to transfer ownership. So unalienable is they're not able to transfer ownership. They're your rights and they cannot be transferred by another, bought or sold or transferred.
Okay, so right. So you can't take these rights away. They can't be transferred. And so that was the same thing with slavery. It's the same thing with the Sunday law here with the Blair Act, and that was the same thing it is the same thing here now with us. So it's going to be interesting to see what the papacy does that with, because they're on the liberal mindset of things. So that's going to be interesting. But what we've seen is that who does the work? Who does the work of slavery in the United States in the 1850 time period? Who did that?
The Protestants.
Who did the work of the Sunday law in the 1888 time period?
Protestants.
Exactly. And who does that in the United States at the Sunday law then?
Got to be Protestants.
Is Catholicism anywhere in here? No. So the Catholic Church isn't the one who's going to make the laws here, and it's not the one who's going to enforce the laws here. That's going to be the Protestants. They're separate and distinct from the papacy. But, as Ellen White stated in these quotes, the papacy will also really receive back from her areas of the countries that she used to have sway in. She will receive homage from them again, increase back in power in their nations. So we can look at the United States and we don't see, some preacher that's the president. We just see a regular president who's taking advice from that church to enact laws. And so now we're going to see, which we already have places in the world who are still pretty Catholic, and you can see them try to enact some really Catholic type laws. And so that's the same thing, is where people are mostly Catholic in those areas and they enact laws that match with their religion. It's not, this really clear Pope makes the throne that says king of the world and now he's gonna sit on it. That's not how it works. The way it is just everyone, is a part of the Catholic religion and believes in that faith, and they try to enact laws in their regions to match what their belief system is. And that's pretty much the whole what happened during the 1260. That's why I keep looking back at that time period, because we got to know what it looked like in Europe, because it wasn't clean. It's not a clean papacy is always in charge. Everyone follows what they do and everything is hunky-dory. It was a little bit of a roller coaster ride if you look at Europe during the time period of the 1260. There were kings and rulers that shot up at times who didn't want to have anything to do with the papacy. There was a lot of craziness that went on. And it was always a struggle for maintaining power for the papacy during this time period. And I thought it was really interesting. And it was a dispensation, the 1260, right? It was a dispensation where the Catholic Church, where the papacy had power. And so we have a dispensation between this time period where the Catholic Church, in those same areas where it used to have power, is going to have power again. So at the same time in the United States, the Protestants are going to have their own power. So it's a really interesting time period, but that's why I keep wanting to know what the 1260 looked like, because that was an example of what the papacy looked like when it was in power. So if we want to know what maybe it looks like here, we can look back to this time period and try to understand the history more to kind of understand what it's going to look like in our future. But anyways, is everything making sense so far about the distinction between the two?
Yes, very clear.
So,
Can I
the
say
other,
something really quick?
yeah.
I was reading the book of Damstig, and he explains how the Millerites, in the period of especially 1844, they understood that the Protestants that rejected the second angel message to come out of it, they became Babylon. So if we are saying that papacy is Babylon, and then the Protestants are Babylon, then you can say that papacy is Protestant, so they're all Babylon.
Okay, but for this study, we want to see them as separate, and that's just going to mess that up.
Okay.
I don't know if Babylon is kind of like a stamp of, the people who do bad things and are part of the King of the North, because we know that U.S. is King of the North and papacy, King of the North. And we know that they can both exist at the same time because this is the husband and this is the wife. They're just divorced, but they both have the same last name. But they're two separate people. So maybe it goes under that, I don't know. But for this study, you have to see that this work in the United States is all Protestant work. And it seems to be that the US is that Protestant place of power, and everywhere else is just a Catholic place of power, minus the region of Asia, which doesn't really seem to come into play. But you know, those countries where the papacy had sway before was pretty much minus the New World, which was the United States, because it was already in South America and in some parts of Africa. Some parts. I thought that was interesting. So it's some parts of Africa, because we know that there's a lot of other parts of Africa that are turning Protestant evangelical from the other study we did a while back. I should write down what I was talking about. Okay. So if the papacy, this goes back to the issue, the next thing she talked about the people who weren't believing that the papacy was going to resurrect. If the papacy is being worshipped, because our quotes made it clear that the papacy is going to rise in power, and all these nations that it once had sway with, they're going to wander after that beast again, right? So if this beast is being worshipped, which is a separate and distinct from the lamb beast, that means that this beast, specifically not in the form of Protestantism, it's two separate beasts, has to resurrect again. So that's to really put the point in at the end there, that is that beast that's going to resurrect. So it has to be both. Add the Sunday law, to this time period, you have both. Both, but they're separate and distinct. So we've been believing that, because what Brother Fell said at the beginning, you have the Protestants doing their work, but they're very conservative minded. And they don't really agree with Pope Francis and his liberal ideas. So you have Francis and his work. So they're separate, but they're both doing a work. This one is going to be enacting laws and persecution. And I'm completely sure that the papacy will as well. So whatever laws and persecution it does would be with its liberal type of ideas. Because you can be a liberal individual, but you try to force it on people, then, you know, whatever laws you're trying to force, then how is that different? There can't be a work of force, you know what I mean? So it's just separate and distinct. So this is the main point here. And then the papacy is the one who's trying to counterfeit God's people. So this is the work of deception right here. And then the other point she tried to make was that Francis and Steve Bannon are not in agreement. And so Protestantism is not a proxy power of the papacy. You can't look at Protestantism as a proxy power of the papacy. They are separate and distinct. They're both working at the same time, but they're doing separate work. So another place you can find this, we're going to have a little quiz here. We're going to draw a line. And we're going to doodle on that line. So we have a time period, 1979, right? And in this 10 years, we know, goes to 1989. So who does the work between this 10 years? We all know this. It's really easy.
Moral majority.
Correct. So you have Jerry Falwell. And then in this time period, we're going to say moral majority. Okay. Do we see the papacy working in this time period?
No.
We don't?
Working with.
Well, they're working with the United States.
1988, 89.
Yeah, with Reagan.
Yeah, with Reagan.
Good. So you have, well, I mean, who was Jerry Falwell working with?
He's working with the evangelicals.
Yes, who are they
Protestants.
all working together with?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
So we're going to put in this time period, working with, how do you spell it? Is it R-E-A or R-A-E?
REA, I think.
Okay, working with Reagan. So Jerry Falwell and the moral majority are working with Ronald Reagan to do what? It is the culture war in the US. And you can look at it as a like a spiritual kind of a civil war. So then we have, that's not how you spell that. I'm gonna put JP2 for John Paul II.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna roll with that. In 1979, which I had forgotten this, John Paul II becomes the first pope
That's not
in the White House, to visit the White House. And he begins his work with Ronald Reagan. What was the point of that work? What was that work they were doing?
To bring down the King of the South. Which was at that time USSR.
So this is a beautiful representation of what the papacy working externally looks like and what Protestants working in the United States looks like. So you have Jerry Falwell and the moral majority. Their concern is the United States and the culture war here and bringing in conservative ideas and values. You have John Paul II. Too, externally, he wants to get his territories back and his little papal states that always followed him back, right? And so communism at this time period had split Europe. This is going to be a horrible Europe here. But you had, and I'm going to put Russia here, and there's a body of water here. This is Europe split in half. So you have the Western Bloc and you have the Eastern Bloc. And you have, sorry about the neighbor and their power tools. And then Rome is in here somewhere. So Rome used to have control over this whole area plus South America, because of the Byzantine Empire, some areas here in Africa, over in South America, wherever the United States is. But now because of communism, and remember that some communism spread to South America too, because you had Cuba, and I think there was more than just Cuba who decided to go, communist direction. And so you had the papacy now having to deal with communism, and it was working hard with Reagan to bring down communism so it could get its power back in the areas where it lost that. So the papacy's concern is with the world at large, this greater area where it had lost its power. The Protestants are concerned with the culture war in the United States. It gets a little trickier because eventually you see that they also have a really high concern for Israel in this area and the original Zion, and there's the whole restorationist movement and all of that. But that's actually both Protestants and papacy are concerned in that, and it's been interesting. Anyways, but the point is that in this time period, we got a glimpse of what it is to see the Protestants at work trying to bring in laws that limit people's rights and put a conservative mindset in. And then at the same time, we got to see how the papacy was working to meet its ends. So does that make sense? I thought it was really cool representation.
Yes.
So they're not working together. Do you see Jerry Falwell working with John Paul II or vice versa?
No.
No. So they don't work together, but they're both working with Reagan.
Which is represented U.S.
Yeah. And Reagan is the head of the U.S. I'm going to put president. So this is an interesting position to be in because you're working with both. This one. So, but these two groups are working separate. I think that's pretty good for that part of it. And the other point is, God gave Adventists those 10 years to be able to see both of those and how they're working. So both those groups and their work. Why would God show Adventists the work that the papacy was doing in this time period if they weren't going to come back later on and have something to do, right? This was like a preview of what's to come. So again, for the people, she was saying, who don't believe the papacy is going to rise up again, why would this happen? Why would this 10 years exist where you have, this example of what both working together looks like if you don't think that the papacy is going to resurrect again? But I don't think anyone in our group believes the papacy isn't going to resurrect, so I don't think that's an issue here. But it's some good points to clear things up in our minds that I liked. So now we're going to look at our midnight cry, because the other reason is we have our midnight cry, right? So let's draw that line. Nowhere near as straight, but it's okay. So 1779, 1989, 9. 2001, 2014,
2019.
And then our midnight cry. So where was the midnight cry? This is our latter rain. Where did this happen?
2018.
In Arkansas. Those series of lectures. So in Arkansas, we are really focused on the evangelicals and their work, but what was the form in which those presentations were presented? What was the structure or the content in order? Not like very specific, what was the content of that video and this video, just in general, a grand overview. What was the content organized as? It started with Fatima, right?
Are you talking about Acts 27?
No. When she began to open up the meetings. So
Yeah, she started with Fatima and then she went in Pyrrhus.
yeah. So we're going to say she started with the mother and then she went to the daughters And who did she end with? Those meetings with?
The mother.
The mother. So this was the order. So you can't say that this is not important, because when our midnight cry message opened up, it opened up like this. So the mother is important, and the mother is going to be coming back and have a big importance. So now we're going to go into the history of that time period. We're going to go a little bit into not Fatima, but we're going to look at the two lines of our line and the counterfeit line. So we had, if we go back to church and state and the separation, we were able to see that Christ separated his people into church and state earlier on than the papacy was able to. The papacy took them about Satan's church and state separation didn't happen until about 500 years later. And then in Millerite time period, you see them being about 100 years apart. So we see in this process that Satan is catching up. And what we're going to look at is the background leading up to how the papacy is counterfeiting our movement in our time. So if there's an alpha and an omega for Israel, then we know that modern Babylon is going to have two histories as well. So one is a history of failure and one's a history of success. So we're going to look at that now. And also, if we can put our reform line and we are able to see our movement and the internal work and how it's, been operating throughout all this time, if we have something that's trying to counterfeit us, we should be able to see the same pattern in that movement as well. It's a counterfeit. It's not the real deal. So it's never going to be exactly perfect. There's going to be mistakes here and there, because you're always going to be able to tell. It doesn't matter how hard you try, you're going to be able to tell the counterfeit from the true, because not even the same painter can make the same exact painting twice. It's just, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? So you're going to be able to see the slight differences here and there. So we have in our history, we're going to begin here. I'll put this out of my way. We have 538 to 1798. This is, we're going to put, how do I want to state this? I'll just put true and counterfeit. Okay, so this was the 1260, and this is where God's people are scattered. And then in 1798, we know that the gathering starts. The papacy, we know that they received their deadly wound in what year?
1798.
1798. And where we mark their beginning is where their messenger first comes up. So in 1798, I'm just gonna, that doesn't look like a 7, so I'm just gonna fix that. So it's there we go. So we had a messenger, and we're able to pinpoint that messenger here, and that messenger is William Miller. And so it's harder to see in the Catholic line, but because we have our line we can work off of, it makes it easier to figure out what's happening in their time period. So where we can see that their line starts and where their gathering up again starts in their history of failure, right? Because we're going to call this the alpha alpha history, right? The history of failure. Theirs starts in 1899, and how we know that is because we have this individual called Eugenio Pacelli. Pacelli comes from a family of Catholics who were very smart individuals, and they saw that the Catholic Church was not operating correctly. And so they saw that internally the Catholic Church needed to be reorganized. And so they all became Vatican lawyers. In God's church, what he does in the time period, in this time period when he's bringing his people together, is he's reordering and restructuring the church internally. So you see that same counterfeit happen. So what starts here is Eugenio Pacelli. He starts studying Catholic law. Studying Catholic law, and this isn't going to look so neat. Let me see if I zoom out one. I think this will work. He starts studying here, and then in 1917, he completely rewrites church law, and this is where he codified. He codified canon law, so we're going to call it Code of Canon Law. So we can mark this here where you had, I'm going to put 1818, but it was about 2 years, 1860 to 1818, where William Miller is also studying and developing his message. And so then you have what happens in 1833 to William Miller.
He gets his license to preach.
Right, so he gets his authority to preach. And so in 1933, our counterfeit, he is able to get this law attached to civil law so that it can be enforced and has some kind of meaning behind it. Because if you just have church law and it's church law, that's fine. That doesn't make any difference. But if this is your history where you're trying to get your laws implemented to turn into a church-state combination again, if you don't have a church-state combination, then you're not doing what you're supposed to. So the whole point of the counterfeit is to get a church-state combination going. So once this message was brought in, the work of the papacy is to get that church-state combination started. And so he started to go around and to have an agreement with a civil power in Germany to get this law put into civil law. And he couldn't do it. But in 1933, we have something interesting happen. What happens in 1933 in Germany? We have the rise of Hitler. And Hitler is trying to consolidate powers enough so that he can play the game of winning everything that he wants. So he and Eugenio Pacelli have a concordat. And so that's where we mark that. And so now you have authority. The Catholic Church only has authority when it can get into a church-state combination and bring its laws into a civil power. So I'm going to put authority here. If it can't combine with any state or civil power, then it has no authority. So that's why we want to make sure we're looking at that. You always, to understand whether they're succeeding or failing, you just have to look at what their essential job function is. And if they're not doing that, you know they're failing. But if they are doing that, you know they're succeeding. So this was also, we're not talking about it, but we have it in the back of our minds. And then here, now we have, it took 46 years for this and 46 years for this until 1844. And here you also have, so here you have a failure and a disappointment. I know it's small, I'm sorry. And so when was the failure and the disappointment of the Catholic Church? When did they realize they chose the wrong country?
1945.
Yep. So this is the end of World War II. Hitler fails, Germany falls, and Russia takes over half of Eastern Europe. Half of Europe. So it'd be Eastern Europe. So we're going to say disappointment. And failure. Okay. So Pacelli is interesting because everything that has ever guided him was Mary. He believed in Mary with all his heart, and he followed her all the way through. So when Fatima came in, he accepted Fatima. And so he was always a supporter. And here you have Lucia. And so we know Ellen White starts and she begins her visions and her writings. And so Lucia was largely shut up. No one wanted to listen to her. She was just locked away, and no one wanted to listen to the message of Fatima. Pacelli was the first pope to accept that. But so he tried to bring that into Catholicism, but she wasn't able to really write or say anything in this time period up until 1945, and she starts writing. So after 1945, she starts writing to the leaders. To accept Fatima. The experience and the messages of Mary. So that was also happening at this time. But this was a failure, and then this was a history of failure. And when did we have the vision that God is stretching out his arm to gather his people a second time in our line?
1888?
It was before that. It was still in this time period.
1850.
Yes. So 1850, we also have the 1850 chart, and the message is supposed to go to the world. So again, this was a very nice, not a very nice meetup, because they did almost pretty much 100 years to the day here in the counterfeit. You had the same issue happen. So this chart, did it bring any new message, or was it just the old message and like an empowerment of the other chart to go to explain? It was the same message, right? Yeah. So the message that comes here, Pacelli announced the Assumption of Mary. The Assumption, yeah. And this did not sit well, as we know, with plenty of people in the Catholic Church. But this is the first time that a pope by himself, and this is important because I've been looking into this and it's a little bit more complicated. As the papal synods and the different conventions that they've had as a body, they've used the whole issue of papal infallibility before, but no pope by himself, alone, going, rogue, whatever, has ever decided to put in something he believes as a law with papal infallibility stamped on it, except for this time. This was the time that we know of. So he used papal infallibility to sign this into law. And the main message that was brought out at this time period was that he was using Mary as a battle cry, basically, to combat communism. So he uses, oh, that turned out horrible. Hold on. Uses Mary to combat. And I think it was from this point, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure it was from this point, he starts to make pilgrimages throughout Europe to Fatima to strengthen that idea of Mary and her messages and how important it is to bring down communism. So the reason why communism is important to take down is because it's taking away power from the papacy and it's limiting their grasp of people. So we can see that why in our time that's the main focus of the papacy. So next, what we have is 1863. That's what we mark next. And we have church organization marked here, right? Adventists. Become an organized church recognized by the US. So we have organization here. What else happened in 1863 that was a bad thing for the Millerites, though?
They rejected the prophetic messages.
The Civil War, the slavery.
That I think they were right on. The one that Tess was pointing to was the rejection of the prophecy, or the 2520. And let me get this. The prophetic message. And so you have in 1962 a Second Vatican Council. The First Vatican Council they had got disrupted and they had to all kind of flee away. So the Second Vatican Council, they organized the Catholic Church again. They finished out the first council and they had a process of organization. So we have that. And then they had a rejection of a message. Which didn't make sense. So, and this organization, who did that happen through? Who helped push that? Who put the pressure on for that?
Don't know.
It would be the Jesuits. They were the ones who put pressure at that time to reorganize the church. And also at that time, they had a rejection because they compromised. So they wanted the popes of the Eastern Orthodox Church to be able to come to this Catholic, the Second Vatican Council, because that was part of the messages that Mary gave to the kids at Fatima. But they compromised and they said, well, they don't have to like accept anything or you know, like participate too much. They just need to come. So that wasn't part of the deal of those messages. So there was a rejection because they compromised on the messages of what Mary gave them. So we're going to put rejection in both these areas here. And then we have a book come out, 1886. Justification by faith. In our time, that ends up becoming a problem. And you have a book written here. Does anyone remember the book and the author? He was partial to Jesuits.
Is that Malachi Martin?
Yep. I don't know how to spell this though.
ACHI.
Okay, so I thought, okay, that was right. Cool.
Is that book the Jesuits and the Betrayal of the Catholic Church?
Absolutely. Jesuits. No, Jesuit. The Jesuit order and the betrayal of the Catholic Church. So another point we want to make is that going forward into the future, if this is showing you what the right things the Catholic Church is supposed to be doing, and you see Pacelli, you see he's with Fatima, you see he's pro-Jesuit, and you see Malachi Martin, he's pro-Jesuit, and the Jesuits are the ones that are trying to reorganize the church and put it together so it can do its work of persecution and whatever else. You know that in the future, the person who's going to be in their history of success has to be pro-Jesuit and pro-Fatima and pro all of these things. So when you look at Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict, are they on the right message? Do they agree with the Jesuits and the reorganization they did? No, they don't. So you know that they're not the leader who takes them into their success. You know that it's going to be Pope Francis going forward. So then we have the history of 1888, and we have the butler and the leaders. They have half of the right stuff, but then Jones and Wagner are also half right, and they meet and they just can't come to agreement. They're stuck on both of their sides, and they just can't come to agreement to do what they need to do. And there's a little bit of internal civil war internally in the movement. And so here we have 1989, and you have John Paul II, and you have the Jesuits. Half right and half wrong. And you have an internal civil war. So I don't remember, she didn't go over it in this presentation, and I don't remember what the half wrong, half right thing was on, but it was something. But they had a civil war here, and obviously John Paul II wasn't interested in anything the Jesuits had to say. So then we have our
He was not
1980.
wrong in not listening to the Jesuits. He was supposed to listen to the Jesuits.
Right. So what did he have right, though?
That's not recalled in my mind right now.
Okay. So this date, we're
That's
gonna,
the King of the South.
huh?
The King of the South. He understood who the King of the South was, I think is what it was.
Oh, okay. King of the South. And I know he didn't do things quite as he made concessions too, because I think in 1989 he had an attempt on his life, and he took that as a sign that Fatima wasn't completed. So he went after the King of the South, right? So that's 1989.
Yeah, and that's where you started with, beginning with their resurrection, when you were talking about it being the beginning in 1989, because it was the revival of Fatima there, but he didn't listen to the Jesuits.
Revival of Fatima. But he refused to acknowledge the Jesuits. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
So now we come to our 1989, and we're going to mark this as time of the end. And I'm just going to put here 126 years. And so if this is 126 years, that's a symbol of the 2520 and a scattering. And here we are come up again, so it would be like 1798. So 1989 is the time of the end, and the messenger comes up. Is it one or two messengers or three? Who comes up here at 1989 for us?
The first messenger?
Is it just one?
Oh, 1 and 3.
I think it was the first angel. I'm not sure.
The one we all know.
Jeff?
It's Elder Jeff.
Pippinger. Yeah, that's our spot. But who also came here?
Elder Parminder?
Yeah, he was.
He was baptized into the Adventist church.
Yep. Yeah. So you have both, but you don't see both. You see Jeff here, but Parminder is here as well. So we're gonna have, this is going into the second video a little bit, but we're gonna stop shortly. We're just gonna put that in here. So you had John Paul here and he ends, but we're gonna have two here. And so I think we kind of all know, but who are the two?
Benedict?
Oh yeah, Benedict and Francis.
Francis.
Oh, what year?
That's not on there yet. That's the video after. But we'll leave it like that for now. So, hang on. Is this making sense for everyone?
Yes, it
thank you.
makes very good sense.
I liked going through it. I really liked the beginning part of this where, well, that's why. This part of it I liked because I like the clarity that this brought over the Sunday law, the close of probation, and how both Protestants and papacy are at work, but they're doing different works and they're separate. So I did like that a lot. I hope this was helpful. It took longer than I thought. I thought I was going to be finished with this in 30 minutes. So
That's a good thing, because I was actually working on some notes for that presentation, but I'll save them for later.
yeah.
You know, Adriana, just to comment on your last remark, the highlight of the president, the United States president, has a very important position because he is the one working with both papacy and evangelical Protestants.
Yep.
And we see that playing out. Papacy part is hidden a little bit more so at the moment. Just, you know, Francis is a little more in the background and so on. And Trump and Pope Francis haven't, you know, overly been in connection.
Well,
eye to eye, but we know it's there.
so we know that we're about to have another kind of 1989-ish thing where the King of the South receives a deadly wound, right? And that is the enemy of the papacy, big time. Russia is still, I don't know. I feel like Russia and the papacy now kind of seem to be friends on the outside, so it's kind of confusing. But
because it still kind of has to go back to Fatima, right? That's their job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, was Fatima finished? It wasn't finished then in 1989.
Yeah, so they're still supposed to consecrate Russia, right?
I think so.
Because they failed. They failed. It was a failure at 1989. I don't know, but that, I mean, I don't know if I've heard her say it that way, but isn't, and maybe she has, and I don't remember it.
I don't know. Does the YPG, I know you guys are watching, do you guys remember? It wasn't a complete success, 1989, even though Russia went down, right?
It was half right, half wrong. You just put it on the other lines.
Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't.
They failed at their job. It was a failure.
Right.
We didn't hear you. What was the question again?
We're just talking about 1989. The Catholic Church wasn't completely able to consecrate Russia, right? And fulfill Fatima. They're searching those memory banks.
Yeah, that was a history of failure. So yeah, they couldn't complete it.
So then it's Panium.
Yes.
That's going to be their success. So we're going to have to see the papacy and Trump working together. Here, isn't it? If these lines are right, isn't that how it works?
Works with the United States at 1989.
Yeah. Not the United, but definitely Reagan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. Anyways, that was that. Anyone have anything else they want to talk about?
Yeah, one question. Trump's rising as the sixth king, right? Which will, how does that connect with the papacy?
Well, falling as the sixth and rising as the seventh. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, sorry.
I don't think that's Trump. I think that's the institution of the United States as a kingdom.
But it's all the way through.
Yeah, so
It not Trump as an individual, but as the United States, as a governmental power.
so what's going down?
The power of the United States.
No,
No?
what's decreasing here is what's good about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's bad is going to increase, isn't it? That's what I thought, but I could be wrong. So
Yeah, so something more in the line of the constitutional United States is going down while the dictatorial United States is rising up.
yeah, that's what I thought too. So,
Yeah. As the Constitution is already broken.
yeah. So that's what I thought was happening there. But anyways, which is, we think that it's going to be this really easy to see overt thing, but really it's, if you're not studying and paying attention, you don't see what's happening ahead of time.
Yeah, very true.
You find yourself in a situation here where you're like, what happened? How did I miss it? Right?
Yeah,
Because the
that's what.
other thing that you have to see, I don't know if this is right, but this seems to me how it works. You have a bad power start. When it starts, it's not as bad. It gets much worse as time goes on. So evil increases progressively as well. So maybe you're here at the Sunday Law and you're an Adventist and you didn't make the right choice and you're still confused, but you're definitely going to find out as time goes on and you see what happens. You see people dying, you're going to know, and you're going to be like, what, you know what I mean? At some point you have to see it, I think.
So did you discuss at the beginning what is the role of the papacy during that time? Because it's the daughter that does the Sunday law, you were saying, right?
Yeah, so what we're pointing out is that the papacy is gaining power back through Europe, the parts of Africa, South America, the places where it used to have power, it's going to gain that back again. And whatever work it does, it's always going to try to do the church-state combination, and it's always going to try to implement its papal laws. So whatever the papacy believes, whatever its laws are, it's going to try to implement those moral laws on wherever it has strength. It may not be in complete accordance with what the United States is doing when it comes to conservative viewpoints on the racism, sexism, and all of that. It might be different laws, but it's still doing the whole point of putting its laws into the civil world where it has no business in. So
And what
that's
about
what I think.
What about in is it Diadochi War 3? The Babylonian Wars, where during Panium to Sunday Law, where Seleucus then defeats Antigonus at the Sunday Law. How do you understand that?
I don't know. Tess put it in this way. So I don't know. You'd have to ask her. Because she has it as Protestants put in the Sunday law and enforce it in the US, and then everywhere where the papacy used to have its power, it's going to have its power. So
she definitely plays a role in the end, and that's what I still don't understand.
I mean, this shows the role that it's playing at the end, so I'm not sure what you mean.
But it's the Protestants that do the persecution, like the 1260, right?
But that's only here in the United States. The whole world has to be deceived.
By the papacy or by the United States?
The papacy,
Okay.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's I don't know. That's what I was asking.
I don't know. But if you watch the video, I don't think she goes into it that deep because that wasn't the point of her study. The point of her study was to just show that it comes back and not go into too much detail how. But those quotes show that it's a clear, distinct powers. There's two different powers. They're both doing a work. And then that preview that we had, where was that? I missed where did we? Oh, it was right here. So right here, because I don't think you guys can see my cursor. So this here, you had the Protestants doing their thing, and you had the papacy doing their own separate thing. So, I don't know, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. A lot of wheels.
Yeah. But it's getting clearer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I was reading after we did the study last week on, was it last week on Leviticus? Was that last week when we did that?
Yeah.
Several places, but one in particular was, if you go through, I think it was Ezekiel, I think it was 6 and 7, or yeah, 6 and 7, I think it is. And you can see the same story of Leviticus 26, basically the verses 30 to 39 happening and going in, prior to and going into captivity. Ezekiel's talking about what, that's what's going to happen. It's really interesting to go through there and see the parallel passages of everything that is happening.
Yeah. That's a lot. I've recently been really stressed out because I'm like, I want to be able to explain this clearly to other people, but I keep thinking about when I go to the Levites, how am I going to explain all this stuff? And you were there for that conversation at the end of Friday where the person, I think Lana asked her, what's it going to look like? Can we still talk to people? How does it work? And it's the same thing that I always thought, because you can't just go to someone in Adventism and slap them with the Sunday law isn't what you thought it was, you know what I mean? You have to start slow. And I was just trying to figure out, like, what does that look like? Like, where do you start? How do you even? So I've been like, I don't know. I probably shouldn't stress about it too much, but at some level, like, I want to be prepared,
Well, you do. The big thing we always need to do is pray. Pray first, that the Lord would recall to your mind the things and put in order the things and give you the opportunities to speak to somebody and help you to glorify Him to whoever you speak to, and then you go forth and you just see where your day goes. A lot of times it's just kind of amazing when you do that. But yeah, I know what you mean, because it is. But in Ezekiel 3 and 4, when he goes, he has a forehead of flint by then. And I think about that forehead of flint when we look at what people are dealing with in Jacob's time of trouble. There are priests that are filled with depression and hopelessness and looking at themselves instead of looking to Christ, and really, really struggling. And there are those that still get their feelings hurt. And the forehead of flint is to have, it's your experience that develops that forehead of flint, that you have your eyes on Christ all the time. You have a thus saith the Lord all the time. Whenever a doubt enters your mind, it's a thus saith the Lord, and you trust in the Lord and all His promises. You recall the wonderful things that He's done in the past in your life, or the histories in the Bible that you see. And you keep your eyes focused on those things and not on yourself. And that develops this forehead of flint, because when we go there, if we're not handling what we're dealing with, what we're having to see and deal with in this part of of time, then we're not going to be able to handle when we go there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's fine. My thing is that the trust and the faith, that's fine, but you have to do your part of actually studying and putting things together. You can't be.
Oh, no, I'm not saying you don't study. That goes without. I didn't even think I needed to say that. We have to study. We have to know.
Yeah, that's my point, because I'm looking at things and I'm like, okay, I'm trying to figure out if I'm gonna. I'm just worried about the practical implementation, right? So God can recall to our minds, but that's only if we stick things in there first. So I'm trying to figure out, okay.
Right, but the thing is if you try to plan, and let's say you go and talk to this person or that person, you're not going in there necessarily. You're going in there with obviously with a prayerful heart, for anybody that you come into, but you're going to talk to this person and they're going to say something that's going to give you a point to meet them on that ground with. Somebody else is going to give you a different point to meet them on that ground with. So planning really doesn't work. It's the studying, and I wasn't trying to leave that part out, it's the studying and learning all these things that when you do get there, you're able to be a listener to hear what, you know, where a person is at and meet them where they're at and go from there. And that's where the prayer part comes in.
I know,
and
but
the recall into your mind.
that's not the planning I was talking about.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. For me, to understand this message now, right? So that whoever I talk to in the future, I can pull whatever I need to for whatever circumstance I'm in. Because we have to be learning how to be good students and good teachers, right?
Good teachers, yeah.
So I'm a very visual learner, and I need to map things out in my mind so that I can, for to even be able to remember or memorize something. I can't read a bunch of paragraphs and remember what they say, but I can memorize what the board looked like in this area, and I know exactly what information I had where, and then that helps me. So in my mind, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how did our message grow? And then it split into this, and then this is a part that talks about the papacy, and then you have a part that talks Protestants, and then we also have Islam in there somewhere and what they do. And I just need charts. So my mind has been like, you know, kind of like, okay, how do I get this into my head so I can remember it?
Yeah.
In the future. So I don't know. I've got a poster board on my wall, and I'm trying to figure out how to organize it in a way where I can remember it, because I still struggle trying to remember things. And I don't know, but like I went back to this video and I'm like, I watched this video already. I watched all the Africa videos when they came out, and half of the stuff she was talking about, I didn't remember.
Yeah.
If I go to a person and I can't remember this, I can't make it up in my head, you know?
We have to know it as a story. And he talks about that in that one called The Good Teacher. The more we know, the more we're, I don't know how to say it. If we know it in our own minds as a story, you know, a story is an easy thing to tell. If you watch a movie, think about it. When you watch a movie, how easy is it to go and tell somebody all about that movie?
I struggle with that too. I'm the person who immediately after the movie, I could tell you everything, but come back to me a week later and I'm like, what movie? What do you mean? I don't remember.
Well, then it's faith and trusting the Lord then to recall to your mind. Or develop a notebook, you know what I mean? With you know, and always be prepared with a systematic notebook. That's
what I was thinking I would have to do, yeah. That's what I was thinking I would have to do.
And that's why I wanted to put together all the notes on the Midnight Crime Message, because I can go back and refer to it all the time. Plus, I have it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, what did they do in the Millerite history?
They made 2 charts. That's what I'm saying.
They did. When they made the first chart, they made 300 of them, and the 300 preachers went out. What did they go and preach and teach?
Those charts.
So the Midnight Crime Message, and all that going forward, you know, because we have a lot more than that to be teaching, with, you know, with equality and all of that. There's so much more. But fill your binder up and have it ready, and be, you know, reviewing it. And then wherever you go, whoever the Lord brings you into contact with, he's going to then help you with, you know, something's going to come to your mind based on a conversation. Something's going to come up based on a conversation. And you'll be surprised at how far you can take off and just go without even realizing that you did it, because you didn't, he did.
Yeah.
It's trust and faith. But I found it was really helpful to have the whole message put together. You know what I mean? And add to it. I keep adding to it.
Yeah.
But it is going to vary where you meet a person based on where they're at. But I tell you what, the way the events are taking place in the world, it's making it easier as they are. Because at the same time, while we're struggling with you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? What are we going to teach them? I can't remember it. At the same time, the Lord is using these events to prepare them to easily hear and accept. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, whoever's going to listen is going to listen. If not, it's a really sad thing.
Yeah.
But, man.
So for those that didn't yet watch 142, that was a huge blessing. So if you haven't watched number 142, check it out.
Okay, so who wants to pray to close?
I will. Gracious Father in heaven, Lord, it is a blessing and a privilege to have been called out of darkness and into your marvelous light. Lord, we each have our own challenges, our own concerns, our own struggles, Father. But as we see the turmoil that is happening in this world, the injustice, Father, that is happening in this world, we just pray for the people that are out there, Lord, for your people, wherever they are, that their hearts be being prepared to hear your voice and call upon your name. The suffering, Father, our hearts ache to watch the suffering, to watch the brutality. But I pray for each one of us, Lord, the priests, not just here, Father, but those that are scattered around the world, to apply ourselves daily by your grace and by your mercy, and with your power and your strength, to apply ourselves in our studies, Lord, that we would continue to increase our skill in studying parables, using the methodology, digging deep for hidden treasure. Well, we ask you as well, Lord, to help us to retain the things that you teach us. And not just to retain them, but help us, Lord, to tell the story. Help us to teach it. Help us, Father, that we could teach it with your power, pressing upon the hearts of people. That your name would be glorified, Lord, in us. All we can do, Father, is bring our helpless souls to you. But I pray, Father, for those that are struggling in depression, in hopelessness, in feeling worthless, that you would do for all of us, Father, what I know so often you've done for me. You bring to my mind precious promises. You bring to my mind things that you have done in the past, not just for me, but throughout your word, Lord, that would build our faith, that would keep us, Father, from looking at self, looking at our doubts, looking at our discouragements, looking at darkness, but to look to the light every step of the way. So that we would always know, Father, that you are with us and you are guiding us. And in your strength, we will go forward in faith, Father. So bless us. I pray, Father, bless us in our studies. Bless us in our walk with thee. Give us your grace and your mercy, Father, to give us the power we need to resist temptation. And fill us, Father, with joyful hearts. Teach us to sing the song, Lord, of praise and thanksgiving for all the blessings you bestowed upon our lives. Bless us, Father. Bless those that are in Portugal still. The school is going to continue on, Lord. We have been so blessed by that school. We pray for the elders, Father. We pray for the priests that are scattered around the world. Just lift everybody up to you, Lord, and ask you to bless us. And we thank you, Father, for hearing and answering our prayer. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.